Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here. All right, well, it's 2 after. We'll go ahead and kick this off. For those who don't know, there's a Q&A box that we use for question and answers. I'll be watching that in case there are questions I can answer, or I will stop Earl at some point to get him to answer the question. As well as there's a chat box. I prefer you don't use that. It's harder for me to watch all the different things. If you have a question that would be better asked out loud, feel free to raise your hand, and when a time is good, I will unmute you and let you ask your question. And then Earl is one of our solution architects here at Databricks. And if you'd like to go ahead and just take over, you got this.
Very good. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So greetings, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. So for today's skill building webinar, we're going to be covering Databricks solution accelerators. So if you don't know what Databricks solution accelerators are, we wanted to kind of introduce you to these. These are a fabulous resource that are free that we offer to you to really help companies and individuals solve a very concrete business problem and really get these into production. So for today's session, I'm going to first give you an overview, of what Databricks solution accelerators are and kind of what we provide. And then I wanted to, show you how to find these solution accelerators and how to get access to them and give you just a brief overview of kind of what's out there. But then I wanted to actually go through a solution accelerator from start to finish to give you a taste of what it's like. And we're going to use a very concrete example, which I'll be walking you through on multi-touch attribution, which I'll explain in a minute. So, really what solution accelerators were designed to do is that oftentimes, many of our customers, they have a very, specific data and AI problem. And, but, it does require a certain amount of business expertise or industry knowledge in terms of to get it to production. It's not, it's not like a generic build an AI model. There's a series of things of a lot of IP that needs to be brought together to get it into production. And this involves, both getting the data and structuring it in the right format that's needed for, to address this particular business problem. It's about determining the right analytical techniques and the right modeling techniques that are appropriate for this particular type of problem. And then there's also the question of how do we then take that insight from AI models and make it useful for the business. And so all of that really, requires, it's a fairly, complex recipe of things that are needed in order to actually make this useful. And so what we're trying to do is to actually bundle, a lot of content together that will actually show you how to go about building a particular industry solution. And we have domain experts here at Databricks that have worked with a wide variety of customers that have actually solved these types of problems. And so they have helped, construct, these solution accelerators to really, make it much easier for you to actually solve it yourself. So at any time that there's like a data and AI use case, I mean, there's really a lot of different steps that are required, from ideation to bringing it into production. And so, usually starts with, collecting the data that you may need to solve a particular problem. And then there's a research phase where you're trying to determine, what is the right technique that I need to be able to solve this problem. And then you have to then bring all that data together. And then probably the most time-consuming step, which is the data engineering aspect, which is trying to transform and mold and massage the data into the right format that's needed for actually addressing this particular type of problem, and also doing it in such a way that it can be scalable and repeatable and implemented in a production manner. And then the next step would be to actually build out AI machine learning models, to address this particular problem. But, just coming up with a prediction or a forecast or whatever is not necessarily the end game. There's still a number of distinct steps after that. There's usually a customization step where you're trying to adhere to specific business rules that you have in order to actually make this work. And then there's also times we would say an optimization step, which is tuning the process in order that it actually will work in production, that it will actually scale, that it will actually integrate well with your existing business applications. And then there's the actual integration phase where you say maybe building apps on top of it, or say, if you're building like a recommendation engine, you need to kind of ensure that it actually integrates with your e-commerce app or your streaming app, for example. And then the last stage is the actual deployment step where you actually push this out into production. So there's a lot of steps, and this is oftentimes a very long process to bringing an AI project. And that's the reason why the vast majority of AI projects never make it into production, is because there are just so many distinct steps and there's so many points of failure. And so this is kind of where, we're trying to make life a lot easier for our customers by taking certain things that are common across businesses, which is oftentimes the approach that, to solve the problem is something that you can make a template for. There's oftentimes the data engineering aspects as well, are oftentimes very generalizable, which means that there's certain, data models and data structures that are particularly conducive for solving this type of problem. The modeling techniques that are used for this is also oftentimes very generalizable. And then also, how do you, take action from this can also be very generalizable. So there's certain aspects that we see as common patterns across customers. And so we're trying to take that and templatize it to make it so that, you can really focus on, I would say, the red blocks here, which is this is the very, company specific adjustments or alterations that you would need to do to actually get this into production. So obviously every company is unique. Every industry, you have very specific requirements and unique business models. So, we can't necessarily build an off-the-shelf solution that will please everybody. But what we can do is actually provide, a consistent framework and some templates that will actually take the generalizable portions out of this process and, save you time to actually focus on the stuff that has to be highly customized for your company. So, with that said, this is, the idea here is that, we're going to actually shrink that overall timeline of taking something from ideation into production by accelerating those steps, which are like the data engineering, the modeling, the research phase, those kinds of things, and basically providing you templates that can be easily configurable. And then the other stuff, you can then focus your energies on in terms of getting this actually to work within your existing applications and the nuances of your data. So this is just kind of an idea of like what if you're trying to create a minimal viable product, if you're just doing everything from scratch from beginning to end, it's going to take you significantly longer than if you're already kind of starting off with a certain baseline. And that's kind of the idea, is to give you a strong baseline that could take you maybe half of the way there, maybe more than that, or maybe slightly less than that, but still it's going to be a massive time savings than just trying to build everything from scratch. Now, I also just wanted to mention that a solution accelerator is really a combination of a lot of different content together. So, foundationally, we provide you notebooks, which actually provides you, the code and even potentially a data model and other things that will that you can run on your own in your own Databricks environment for solving the solution. But naturally, like notebooks, sometimes they may be a bit overwhelming. So we actually have a lot of other collateral to help contextualize these notebooks, make them a lot more comprehensible and understandable. And this means, when we release them on our website, this includes, we all have like a blog post that's in a very business-friendly language. We'll have video recordings of demos of these solution accelerators. We'll have overview presentations. And in addition to that, our team can even do more hands-on type of work with you guys in terms of actually giving you in-person hands-on workshops and other types of sessions to help socialize these and help explain how it works and help make it easier for you to apply this in your business. I think the other thing too is that really there's a buffet of solution accelerators out there that really will provide something for everyone. So we have solution accelerators for a wide variety of industries, from retail to healthcare to financial services and media and entertainment. And this is just a very small sample of the ones that are out there. We also work with a lot of our partners who have also published solution accelerators, and we release them also on our website. So there's really a plethora of content out there that's available. And so if we really encourage you to actually go and explore some of this stuff, because you'll be able to find some interesting content out there that's bundled in a very approachable way to make it easy for you to get started. This is just an example of some of the solution accelerators for retail, and these are the blogs posts that, basically explain those solution accelerators. So for example, we have one around out of stock modeling. So if you wanted, if you've ever, gone to the store and what you're looking for is out of stock, we're really trying to help retailers address those particular problems using AI, basically trying to identify certain demand signals and be able to be extremely responsive so that they can place some of their shipping orders much sooner and be able to prevent out of stocks as much as possible. Or we have fine grain time series forecasting, which is really for demand forecasting, to be able to get down to, individual SKUs at individual stores or and make sure that you have everything, well stocked as well, and be able to project well into the future so that you can plan for future demand and things like that. So there's a lot of examples of great solution accelerators that, this is just retail. There's obviously there's plenty for other industries. And so if I were to actually go onto our website, for example, this is where if you just go to solutions and solution accelerators, which is, easy to find on our website, you'll then be able to actually go down, search for them by industry, and you'll see just dozens of examples, which will all have, a wide variety of content, which would include, obviously besides notebooks, we'll have, blog posts, we'll have ebooks and videos. There may be demo recordings involved. There are, other types of things, and you can also reach out to us, and we'll be happy to actually even go more in depth in some of these content if you're interested. So that's kind of at a high level introduction to the solution accelerators that we offer. I wanted to actually focus on a single example and kind of walk you through both, from beginning to end, how it works, just so you can get an idea, because it's, these solution accelerators, this is not like an academic article of, telling you how to do things. We're really trying to make it very actionable. And this includes everything from how to prepare the data, how to make it a production pipeline, to, obviously building the models, to then making it business friendly through may include actual business dashboards or decisioning logic that you'd then use to make this into production. So it's it's really, much more comprehensive than just a theoretical article or blog post. I mean, there's a lot more substance behind it. So the example I, wanted to show today, and even though we have dozens of solution accelerators, I chose multi-touch attribution, for a couple of reasons. One, I actually came from the advertising world, and so this was actually a common example, but this is something that crosses a lot of different industries. So that's kind of why I picked it. And I know we have folks that maybe on this call from financial services or healthcare and retail and things like that. But so there oftentimes is, if you're ever sort of in the need of if you ever have any sort of marketing efforts, whether that be to acquire new customers or to upsell them, or any type of sort of communication touches that you need to have. It could be even in healthcare with, with patients or doctors, for example. The goal around multi-touch attribution is really trying to optimize your marketing campaigns and marketing spend. And the idea is you're trying to eliminate as much wasteful marketing channels as possible and really invest most, in the ones that are most effective. And the idea behind multi-touch attribution is giving credit to, the marketing campaigns or ads that actually were successful in resulting in a conversion. And this is actually a very complex problem because oftentimes, the customer journey from awareness to, actually clicking on something to buy or to convert it's not so straightforward. There's oftentimes ad impressions that are occurring in a lot of different channels. You may be getting a display ad here. You may find something in search. You may get something on Instagram or Facebook. You may see a billboard. You may get a TV ad. And there's all kinds of events, advertising events or communication events that are occurring while you're in this customer journey before you actually convert or become acquired. And so this ability to assign credit is a fairly complex type of problem. But this is kind of what they're trying to do. And, obviously, more recently, especially with digital advertising, we are able to track, exactly what marketing messages you've received. So we can basically construct the order of events that happened prior to a conversion, but now we need to kind of determine which ones, were the most effective at driving you to convert, and then use that to help optimize your marketing campaigns. So that's kind of the idea behind multi-touch attribution. Now, we're going to show you a methodology for doing this. Now, I do want to mention that, there are actually a lot of different ways of doing multi-touch attribution. So there's not like a single one solution fits all approach. There's actually several of them. The one that we're going to show you today is what we call Markov chains. It's really a great statistical technique for situations like this where you have a sequence of events, and people keep transitioning from one state into another, and in each state there's a certain probability that's occurring or a certain probability distribution. And the idea within Markov chains is really to use these chains of events that are chains with different distributions to to figure out both the efficacy of particular channels, and also you can also simulate like what would happen under different types of marketing mix channels. So but what we're going to do in this particular example is show you how to build these Markov chains. And it's really involves setting up what we call a transition probability matrix, which is basically looking at the sequence of going from one state to a next and what the probability is within that overall customer journey. And then looking at we also have to look at what is an overall probability to convert, and then isolate out the effect for each channel. And so that's basically the idea of like what will happen if that, if we never had any Facebook ads, for example, and see what that would mean from a conversion probability perspective. And using that, we then are able to come up with an overall attribution estimate in terms of what the efficacy of each marketing channel is on driving conversions. So, just again, I can provide a diagram that shows you kind of how this would work. So think of your customer journey, you're starting without, having not been exposed to anything. And then, maybe 20% of folks are targeted with Facebook ads, another 80% through display ads through the Google ad network. And then there may be a certain sequence of events that might happen, which is that 40% of those then get targeted with Facebook, and then 80% of them get converted after that, for example. So that's kind of how these kind of transition probabilities work, is that there's kind of a mix, and there's a certain probability percentage that you're going to get, a subsequent marketing communication after that, or go to a conversion. And so that's this idea. And of course, in like a real life scenario, these type of matrices can get very complex because of all the different marketing channels that people use. But that's kind of the, kind of a simplified version that makes it easier to visualize. And so the idea is we would be trying to come up with a probability conversion based on any, type of journey that would occur. So like, for example, if someone was, just exposed to a Facebook ad, what is that overall conversion probability, which is like 16% in this case, just by multiplying those two different probabilities together. And the idea being we would just go through each individual channel. We're also going to look at the overall conversion probability across all channels, so that we can then, try to isolate out individual channels as well. So this is sort of the overall conversion probability when we sort of sum up all potential conversion journeys. And then we would look at different removal effects. And so the idea being, we will sort of look at all, customer journeys that had Facebook ads in them, and look at what the conversion probability is, with those different Facebook ads. And then we'll look at what would happen if we were to basically just take out that Facebook, say that Facebook element was taken out and they never, basically the journey ended, before they got to the conversion. So we can kind of get an understanding of what that effect would be if we just excluded Facebook entirely. And so that's kind of the idea of coming up with sort of that removal effect for each channel. So this is sort of, at high level, kind of how that would work. And then, we would then go through, basically one by one through each channel and come up with a channel attribution. And that channel attribution is basically the removal effect divided by, all removal effects. The idea being that some people will just convert without any marketing. They'll just like walk into the store essentially. But there's going to be, we basically going to see there's, what is that overall attribution of that one channel over, versus all marketing channels in total. And so that will give you sort of that actual channel attribution. So in this particular example, it's basically saying that, there's like, if for any given purchase, we can give 36% credit to Facebook, 63% to Google, and like a 0.3% to email, for example. And that's kind of how we would go assign credit to a particular conversion. So that's just an example. I'm now actually going to go through and walk you through this in the notebooks in the solution accelerator. So, you just go about this by like, you'd find the solution accelerator online. We actually will provide you links to the notebooks. So we'll take you to something like this, which is a multi-touch attribution, which is basically a repo containing some notebooks. I then clone this particular repo into my Databricks environment. And I now just wanted to actually go through, one by one into each of these different notebooks. So I just kind of want to walk you through that process. So I just kind of explain more of the kind of the math behind the attribution approach. This is actually but there's actually a number of steps that are involved just before this. And this is, kind of perhaps the most important piece, which is really actually creating and preparing the data so that we can actually get to the point where we can make those calculations. And, so the very first step is to actually look at the data. So I want to mention this piece is probably the piece that you would have to kind of do on your own. I think we give you an example of creating some synthetic data, because obviously we can't share any actual customer data. So we actually generate, basically have like some data generation pieces in our notebook just to kind of show you. But the idea here is we just kind of want to show you what the data structure would look like, as a starting point for a multi-touch attribution solution. So the way this would work is you usually have, for each potential customer or prospect, you're going to have a record, which would include like a date and time of each interaction or each ad impression that they've been given, and in what type of ad impression that was, whether that be through, social media or search engine or email, and so forth, and then a flag of whether they've converted. So that's kind of the overall starting point. If you work with your advertising partners, they will frequently have data that looks very similar to this. Sometimes it may be broken up by channel, and you may have to bring all of that together, separately, but it would end up into kind of this consolidated data set that will have, a record for that particular prospect or customer, and the date and time, and then the actual ad impression and whether they converted. And that's kind of really the first step in this, is just getting a hold of the data. The second piece to this is the actual data ingestion. So we it's not sufficient to just get the data. I think we want to kind of help you set up what would most likely be a repeatable pipeline that will ingest this data. And also because ideally with these multi-touch attribution, you're actually going to try to do this in somewhat in real time, because what happens with a lot of your digital campaigns is you start collecting data and you need to start calculating these attribution amounts, and then you start shifting your ad spend, as you start getting more information. So as you start discovering that certain channels are really ineffective or not working, you then start shifting your money around and towards the more effective ad channels, and decreasing your investment in the less effective ad channels, so that these are you're continually sort of optimizing as you go along. And so the idea being was that, like, on a repeat or on a continuous basis, and this could be potentially like a stream, you'd want, or on a daily or hourly basis, you'd be ingesting your campaign data into a data mart, so that you can then run your multi-touch attribution models on the data. And the so the idea here is that we can actually point to a cloud storage location that is receiving some of this. We're going to use our autoloader to basically stream these files into a data mart that will be your attribution data mart. And this will be, using our autoloader capabilities. There may be some initial data enrichment, such as, taking date and timestamps or conversion data and converting them, for example, and then writing it out to data lake, to Delta Lake, because, Delta Lake is really well optimized for Spark and for ACID transactions and things like that. And then we would just create a database, like a attribution database, essentially, that will have all of these records. We would call this like the bronze table, which is really your source raw your source raw data that would then feed subsequent steps in our process. And this is, again, what we're going to see the exact same data, but the difference is this now becomes more of a it's more of a production ingestion pipeline that will be able to, that you can run on a continuous basis to keep ingesting marketing data as more data comes in throughout the life of your campaigns. The next step is then to start preparing the data for doing the Markov chain calculations that we just walked through in the slides. And there's a bunch of data transformations that are required to get the data in the right format to come up with these calculations. And what we want to do is we start off with this kind of raw data that's really at this individual impression level, and we want to be able to actually construct an overall end-to-end journey for that particular customer or prospect. And the idea here is that we're going to create a journey table. And here we have some of the code here that is going to be used for actually constructing that journey. We're essentially just going through for each individual UID or user ID. We're going to then start appending all these different events in the sequence of their visiting order, and in such a way that we'll be able to construct an end-to-end journey. And it will start, there will be a start point, and then there'll be a conversion point at the end, or non-conversion. So, the idea here is we're just going to then go through that bronze level data, start parsing all the each individual impression level, and then creating a flatten it so that we have like an individual, basically the whole path of the journey. So this is what that data now looks like, is that we have for each customer or prospect, we will have the full journey that they took to, whether that be either to a conversion or to a non-conversion, like in this example, null at the end being a non-conversion. We also, parsed out a couple of additional columns here. So a lot of marketers are very interested in, we would say, the first interaction or the last interaction. And the reason being that a lot of it, there's some people think that the first interaction is the one that really drives everything. And it's very important to invest heavily in things that drive first interactions. And other people have a different philosophy, believe that the last interaction is the one that really got people over the to that last mile and convince them to convert. So, we're going to, it's, so for some folks, they want to be able to at least know what the first interaction, last interaction is. With the first interaction, it oftentimes, will start a chain of events, because, for example, if you click on a Facebook ad or on a display ad, it usually will then trigger some retargeting logic so that you will then be targeted again, a few days later with another ad and things like that. So it actually is oftentimes the beginning of a journey. So that's why a lot of people take a lot of focus on the first interaction. The last interaction, on the other hand, is sort of the people feel like is the one that really helped them, convince them. And so there's kind of this idea that you kind of want to look at both of them, or sometimes you want to give more credit to the first or the last. And so we're parsing that out so that we can actually do some analysis on that later on. And so we've created this table. It basically sums up the journey, what the first interaction and the last interaction is. We consider it sort of a gold level table, because now we can actually build dashboards on it. We can start doing some of the markup chain analysis that we'll have in a minute. And in this case, we're actually going to also calculate some metrics for, like, if we were to attribute 100% credit to the first touch or the last touch, what will that look like? So we wanted to create some initial analysis, and that's where we're, creating, using some SQL here to run some calculations on assuming this is a first touch or a last touch, and see what the results are. And so we basically are going to run a few calculations, and here we go. We now have this nice graph at the end, and what this is telling you is that, for example, for Google display ads, we'll see like a higher, performance when it's sort of a first touch versus a last touch, while social networks are kind of the opposite, which is that they tend to perform better towards the end rather than at the beginning, for example. And so this just kind of gives you some interesting insights about kind of which ones are starting at the beginning or at the end. But with that said, this is a very simplistic approach to assigning credit. And that's kind of why we want to actually use the Markov chains, because the Markov chains, kind of look at it holistically, and they look at the transition of events overall, and will help you be able to assign, I would say, more fractional type of credit, where, you can assign, for any conversion, you can maybe assign 20% credit to one, and then 50% to another, and things like that. And so that's where we're going to get to the next step, which we call, which is actually doing the Markov chains. And so, we have some nice explanations here to kind of, which basically are very similar to what I just showed you in the slides, just to kind of explain some of the theory behind it, of these changes, of looking at individual channels and how to remove the effects of an individual channel, and then make those calculations. So we're going to do just a couple of different steps. By the first step being, doing this transition probability matrix. And so there's going to be we basically are creating some functions in Python that are going to really parse out each of the state transitions, which is going from one state to the next. And so, basically we're going to go through that overall journey, look at the overall state transitions from, like, say, going from, from social media to search, or from, start to affiliates and things like that. And so when we run some of these functions here that basically parse out for an individual user, that this could be like their overall path, but we're going to then there's a number of different state transitions that are occurring, which is they start to affiliates and affiliates search engine and so forth. And so we're basically parsing out each of those as an individual record, as a transition state. And we're then going to then calculate some probabilities of, like, what is the, in aggregate, looking at everyone who's gone from these different, from one state to the next. And so basically by, for example, we'll look at, say, affiliates and see, like, how many people were at affiliates, and then what was the next state that they went to after that, whether that be a search engine, did they go to Google to search it, or did they then get a Facebook ad? And then we'll sort of look at the overall percentage, the overall probability of affiliates going to search engine over all potential transitions that they could have gone to from affiliates. And so that's kind of what this idea here is in this code here, is that we're, looking at their start to end state from each of these events, and then calculating what that transition would look, what the probability is of going from one state transition to the next. So there's a couple, calculations, and we're going to just make sure that, all probabilities add up to 100, so you're not, like, double counting things. And then we after we've gone through this exercise, we can now construct a probability matrix. And this is what an example looks like. And so we can say, if you received an email, you have, like, say, a 25% chance of then going to an affiliate partner, or you can go 12% to get a display ad after that, and so forth, or, a 0.6% chance of converting, after receiving an email. So these are like kind of all the probabilities across, from one state to the next. And then we go through that step of basically removing all of the different states, and we're going to calculate just an overall probability. And that's what this function here is doing, where we basically run, the function that will actually, calculate the probability for, if, of converting, if there were no sets of no channels or no marketing at all. And then from there, we start doing the step where we're actually going to take out or look at the effects of each individual channel. So we have, like, another, function that we've defined in Python that's going to actually do this calculation for us. And so again, I think a lot of, to actually do a lot of this stuff yourself, I think would be very laborious. That's kind of why it's nice that we've actually kind of created some of these functions for you. And from here, we then, determine this is like the total conversion probability. And then we start using the removal effects for each one, using the get transition probability graph function. And we say, like, what we get that transition probability when we remove a particular channel. And so we go through each of the different channels, calculate that, output a conversion probability into the pandas data frame. And now, voila, we have sort of our final result, using this Markov chain method, where basically we're going to take, for conversions, we're basically going to assign, 38% credit to affiliates, and 25% to social networks, and 22% to search engines, and so forth. So this is kind of the new attribution percent when we take into account kind of all of the channels together. And we're going to then, merge it back into the gold attribution table. And now we can actually compare holistically, not just the first touch and last touch, but we also have that, this new Markov chain, which I think is a much more robust method of calculating it than this first touch and last touch. And you can then use this information to kind of help start optimizing your advertising budgets. And that's kind of where, the very last step would be, which is actually then you've come up with these great insights, and now you want to present it to the business, or you want to be able to then, potentially trigger, some reoptimization of your ad spend. And if I were to go to this is sort of the last step, where we actually are just building a dashboard that would then be available to the business. We're basically just creating some nice dashboards. I'm gonna show you sort of what the actual dashboard looks like, but it's basically like taking a campaign, overall spend, what the conversions are versus impressions, and when those conversions happened, and then publishing out sort of the overall channel performance, so that you can kind of understand which ones are most effective, and you can see affiliates is sort of the winner on this list. But we also have to take into account how expensive each of these channels are. So while affiliates might be most effective, they may also be more expensive. So we also have to kind of look at the overall cost per acquisition. And so as it turns out, at least in this particular example, cost per acquisition for affiliates is very low. So this is actually really the sort of the best in the sense that both the cost per acquisition is very low, but also their attribution is very high. So just by investing more money into the affiliates, you'll be getting greater bang for your buck, because it's an inexpensive way of marketing, but it's also highly effective. Email, on the other hand, as you can see, is both ineffective and relatively expensive from a cost per acquisition perspective. So that would be sort of your least effective marketing, and you'd probably want to dial back your spend in those channels while targeting sort of your most effective ones, which in this case would be things like affiliates and social network and search, which would sort of be your best, while display and email are sort of your least effective channels. So this is kind of an example of kind of how you would go from end to end, starting with creating the data, building the pipelines for ingesting the data, then preparing the data for building your attribution models, running the attribution models, and then presenting the results to the business. So it really does get you pretty far along in terms of how you'd go about constructing this type of solution. Again, there are also other techniques in this space. I don't want to make it sound like this is the be all and end all, but I think this is just a great way of showing how you could go about building a solution from scratch, so that you're not necessarily completely in the dark. All you just need to do is kind of construct your data in a way that sort of looks similar to what we showed you here in our notebooks, and then you can then really leverage a lot of the notebooks as is to be able to get to the level of insight that you need. So with that said, that's sort of really the end of the presentation. I did just wanted to kind of mention, if you go to please visit our website, to Databricks.com solutions accelerators here, which will take you to the list of all the solution accelerators. Go poke around in there and see if there's something that would be useful for your business or your industry, or maybe addressing a particular use case that's really important to you right now. And then also visit our GitHub page. It's github.com Databricks Industry Solutions, and that actually has all of the notebooks associated with our industry accelerators. So I definitely recommend going to that as well, so that you can actually then clone it to your repos. And I mean, all of these are designed to be able to, you can run them as is. We maintain them. Obviously we're providing sample data so that all of this should execute and run. They're all idempotent notebooks. I mean, so these should all give you the same results and be able to run consistently without any problems. So these are fully like executable examples that you can walk through, run it yourselves, and be able to get results. So all that's kind of what you need to do is then just maybe configure, modify these notebooks to accept the types of data that you're working with in your own organization, and then make some additional customizations to kind of address some of the unique business requirements that you have in your business. But this can take you pretty far along in your process and give you a lot of explanations and assistance along the way. So with that said, I wanted to give some time if there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks. This was really great, Earl. Really appreciate it. Any questions? Please don't be shy. Please just raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can ask your question. Any questions are allowed. All right. Well, looks like you did such a good job. There are no questions. There's no confusion. So thanks so much for your time today, Earl, and thanks to everybody who joined, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.